Hello again, everybody, and welcome to episode 30, the Kenny Holtzman edition of Angles and Attitudes. As always, he's John and I'm Mark. And today we go to the hardwood. We switch gears a little bit, and we're happy to be joined by a Holy Cross graduate, an Elmwood Park resident, and an Illinois Basketball Coaches Association Hall of Fame member, Al Biancalana. Al, thanks for joining us and welcome aboard.
Thanks, Mark. John.
Hey, Al.
Pleasure being with you guys today.
Hey, well, thanks for taking time. I mean it. This is our first trip to the hardwood, so you got to take it easy on us. We're hockey guys, so we got to switch from the Bowers to the Converse sneaks there to get on the basketball court. So,
well, before we start talking about basketball, since this is the Kenny Holtzman edition, when I was about 12, 13 years old, my two uncles, Bob and Jim, were in the National Guard. They took me to the National Guard and introduced me to Kenny Holtzman,
Wow.
who was pitching for the Cubs at the time. This is probably 70, 71. And Kenny Holtzman took me for a ride in the tank.
Al, those were those times when he would have to go. I remember DeRocher, they would say they would put in like Rich Nye or Salma when he was on the leave.
That's right. And that's where I got to meet him. And he took me around for a ride in the tank. I'll never forget that.
that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing. That's one of those, and he still managed to have enough time on the mound to pitch 2 no-hitters. I was watching the other day on Marquee, another rain delay, or they just cut away from the game because they were losing by more than 2 touchdowns. They went back to highlights, and Kenny Holtzman and the great Jack Brickhouse making the call on the no-hitters there. So
that's great.
But so we're all kind of neighborhood guys. I went to Ridgewood, so I went to the public school, hated rival. You guys went to Holy Cross, but take us back to how the whole coaching thing started, your basketball career at Holy Cross, and how it led you to Weber. And as they say, the rest from there was history.
Well, I kind of grew up as a football, baseball guy, but for whatever reason, my number one love was always basketball. I just loved basketball. And when I got to Holy Cross, I had played basketball in junior high, of course, like everybody else. In those days, you just played whatever sport was in front of you. You played with the neighborhood guys and you just played that sport. And so during the winter, you'd play basketball. And when I got to high school, I made the freshman team. And then my sophomore year, during the winter, I went out for the sophomore basketball team, but the head wrestling coach, Bernie Bothroyd, was the offensive line coach on the varsity football team. And he said to me, he says, if you want to start as a junior, you're gonna have to come out for wrestling. Well, I never wrestled in my life. And so it turned out that what he really wanted was he wanted some fodder for, we had an all-state heavyweight wrestler. And at the time I was about 190 pounds as a sophomore. And he just threw me in there like the Christians to the Lions. And this guy would just beat the living daylights out of me every single day in practice. And I'd come home with bloody noses and broken bones and everything else. And the only sport I ever quit in my life was my sophomore year. And so what I did was I decided to get into coaching. I quit after about a month of wrestling my sophomore year and started coaching. And then I went out for the basketball team my junior year, got cut. And I went out and did some coaching in the YMCA. And then my senior year, when I got cut again, Pat Campabazzo cut me again. He just laughed every time I stepped on the floor for tryouts. Biancalana, what the hell are you doing out here? And I said, I just want a chance to play on the team. But then I coached the 8th graders at St. Vincent Ferrar in River Forest. And that's where I started kind of coaching, pretty seriously. I went to Elmhurst College to play football. One of the reasons I chose Elmhurst College was because all through college, I decided to stay and coach at the junior high 8th grade basketball. Then my senior year in college, Jim Harrington at Weber High School asked me to student teach and coach his freshman team at Weber High School. And that's where I started my high school career at.
Al, when you were at Elmhurst, real quick, you were coaching junior high, like at nighttime, you'd get run back and do the junior high team. Okay.
Yeah. So I've been coaching consistently since I was 16 years old.
Wow. Okay.
That's
a long time.
That is, yeah. To be doing anything at that point is, but you got to love it, and it's got to be a passion. I know my dad was a teacher for 30 plus years, and he didn't do it because you thought you're going to make a lot of money on it. It was just a passion, and it was just in you, and there was no getting out of you there. That Weber, the Catholic League, obviously Weber's gone now, and we have a great story. Obviously, my daughter just got married recently, and the priest who married them, she was in the office with them, and he had a picture, and she recognized it was Coach K. He had a picture with Coach K, and he said he was, first of all, he was surprised that my daughter would recognize Coach K, and second of all, he's a big basketball guy, and he said there's like Jesus, the Pope, and then Coach K. That's the hierarchy as he saw things for what was going on because of Coach K. Was Coach K, did he play at Weber?
Coach K played with he was the same class as my uncle Bob, who unfortunately passed away. He's the youngest of son, my dad's brother. And they were all involved in the restaurant. Coach K, when they closed Weber, still had the single game, the highest scoring single game record, 49 points in that gym. He came back to be inducted into the Weber Hall of Fame. I remember when I was kind of around there. But the one thing that I remember about Coach K the most was one time I went out to California. I used to coach in California, and he was doing a clinic out there. And after he finished the clinic, I had gone up to him and I introduced myself to him. And right away, he recognized my last name because, they lived in the neighborhood, and his mother and his father, who still lived in the neighborhood, used to always go to my dad's restaurant to eat. And he recognized the name. He recognized, the Biancalanas, because all my uncles and my dad went to Weber as well. And he wound up spending about an hour and a half after the clinic with me, and it's something I'll never forget. He was so gracious with his time, and we had, writing correspondence back and forth over the years, and he was very gracious with his time and his ties to Chicago and to Weber High School. It was very sweet of him.
It's
amazing. At Elmhurst, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, John.
Yeah, when you were at Elmhurst, Al, did you know, like right after Elmhurst, I know you were getting your degree and everything. Did you know after Elmhurst that you were going to continue this basketball thing?
Well, I was at the crossroads, John. When I graduated, I had an opportunity. Our head football coach was Tom Beck. I had played 4 years of football at Elmhurst, and I had a really nice career, and was all conference 2 years in a row, and was small college All-American, and a really nice success. And Tom Beck got the job at Grand Valley State, which was a top Division II school. And he asked me to go with him as the GA and be an assistant offensive line coach. So I was going to get my master's at Grand Valley State while coaching football. And then at the same time, I had the offer to go to Weber High School and start my coaching career, my teaching career there. And I chose the basketball route, and I often kind of wonder if I had gone the other way, what would have happened. Now, the way things turn out in life, the funny thing about that story was, instead of hiring me, the next man up that Coach Beck hired was Brian Kelly, who now is the head coach at Notre Dame.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a shame they didn't get you there. They missed that one.
You know what? I could have been the head coach at Notre Dame.
Big miss.
That job.
Yeah, well, that's a tough gig right about now because I was watching, and I apologize. My wife didn't come home in enough time to watch the dog, so he may be in or out. Champ may be in or out here, but the Irish are looked upon now as potentially being overrated there. So with their number 7 mark, so maybe your fall will be a little bit easier than
I don't know.
Brian Kelly's
I think
will.
he's done pretty good for himself.
Yeah, he's like what 1-2 now at total victories because of his longevity there, and he's been stacking a lot of double-digit win seasons. So
yeah, no, he's done a wonderful job. But the face of college sports has really changed. You know, I spent a decade in Division I, coaching basketball at both Bradley and UIC, and I just, you know, I look back at that time and look at what's happening now, and I still have a lot of friends that are coaching Division I, and it's just so different now with the NIL and the transfer portals and everything that you're dealing with. It's just it's not the same game that I left just a short time ago.
And you mentioned when you were younger, you just played whatever sport based on the season, especially being in the Midwest, you had the changes in the seasons. And
Yeah.
then right away, I wrote down AAU and all of those types of things. So you brought me back to the evolution of it, being a recruiter, you know, the kids now being able to sell their image or own their image. Are there some of those things that are good for the game, or you know, I'll leave that to you on that one.
Yeah, Mark, like anything else, there are good and bad things in anything that you do. You know, what's good about AAU from a recruiter standpoint is you get to watch kids play against top competition. So sometimes it's easier to evaluate kids under those types of conditions. That's good. The bad part about it is that you see tremendous burnout. You see kids by the time they get to college, they're on the downslope rather than the ascension. You know, you see the bottom line. We had a couple kids quit at East because they felt that they had no future in college. So they didn't understand why they needed to put in all the effort in high school. And, you know, back in my generation, you played high school sports because you wanted to play with your buddies, because you wanted to leave a legacy, because it was fun thing to do, you know, because, you know, you like the newspaper coverage, you know, you like all those things that went with it, right? You didn't do it because it got you to college. I mean, that was the last thing. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you know, my recruitment for football didn't start until after my senior year of playing football. Then all of a sudden I started thinking about where I was going to go to college. It didn't start back when I was a freshman. Right. You know, it's, you know, now I deal with parents, you know, during a kid's freshman year, you know, where do you think my kid could go to college? You know, college, let's see if he can pass algebra class first before we think about college.
Yeah.
You know, and so we get so ahead of ourselves in the game now. And so, you know, a lot of people say that kids haven't changed over over these past generations. I think kids have changed greatly. I think kids now have so many different avenues. I think that attention spans have shortened. I think that, this generation of, playing Xbox and doing all of these centenary things that don't get them out playing and using their imagination and trying to solve problems for themselves. These are things I try to teach my own children. You know, when you get into a tough spot, mommy and daddy can't just be there all the time trying to solve your problems for you. And so I see things now that you deal with as a coach that that you shouldn't be dealing with. And that's why these good young coaches are either quitting very early or not getting into the game at all. There's a huge shortage of good young coaches now, because it's it's too hard. And I feel really bad for young coaches because it's too difficult of a job now. It's not like it used to be where, you talk about the camaraderie, you talk about the Catholic League. I grew up when I was in my 20s as an assistant in the Catholic League. The thing I looked forward to most was after the games, we used to go to Bill Gleason's place, the coach's corner over on Milwaukee Avenue in Chicago. And every coach in the Catholic League after the game Friday night would be there. And I'd be a fly on the wall sitting at the bar, and the coaches would be drawing stuff on napkins, and and I would take those napkins and put them in my pockets and stuff, and decipher them when I got home and stuff, and and put them in my notebook, and that's the way I grew up, and that's how I kind of learned the game. And now it's just not that way anymore. I mean, the burnout is just incredible because the administrations are trying to protect themselves, and there's just so much blame on coaches because little Johnny, is in this situation. It's just it's very, very difficult. It
You
really
see this now, Al. Everything is basically like you're saying, and Mark and I have gone through it as hockey coaches. We are really under that microscope. I mean, it's amazing, and I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of people come up to you and say, "Well, what do you mean it's changed?" Oh no, it's changed, and I'm glad you brought this out in this interview. Just to go a little bit forward, how does this California whole thing start with you? You're at Union and you're
yeah.
at Clovis. How do you get to that point?
Well, yeah, the thing, what I really tried to expand my knowledge. I mean, the one thing that I being a football guy and not a basketball guy, I came to the realization that if this was going to be my passion, I knew nothing about what I was about to get myself into. So I had to try to expand my network as much as I possibly could. So I did some things that probably a lot of people never did. And one of the things that I always did was I always wrote 50 letters every spring to coaches. This is before the internet. This is before email. So I would sit down and write 50 letters to 50 coaches. I used to go to the library and get the addresses of universities and write to coaches. And out of those 50 letters, some years I would only get 5 back. Some years I would only get 7 or 8 back. But those 7 or 8 would be really something. And in the spring of 1981, I believe it was, I was sitting in the basement of my parents' house. I was still living at home, watching Fresno State play against DePaul in the NIT championship. And Fresno State was playing this matchup zone. And I had never heard of a matchup zone before. And the commentators kept talking about the matchup zone, the matchup zone. And I, followed basketball pretty religiously, and I'd never heard of it. So that night, I wrote a letter to Boyd Grant, who was the head coach at Fresno State. And I wrote him a nice long letter. They had won the NIT, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. And, do you have any information? Well, it turns out that, like most head coaches, he took the letter and handed it to his assistant. And the assistant was Ron Adams. Now, Ron Adams has been named the top assistant in the NBA the last 7 years. All right. But before that, it was Boyd Grant's assistant. Well, Ron Adams sent me back a package at the time that was about this big. And in it was all of his stuff about the matchup zone, because he was the guy who implemented the matchup zone, and he brought it over from Europe. And because he used to coach in Spain. So long story short, he asked me in this letter, if you know of any good young players, we recruit Chicago. Well, I was the freshman coach at Weber, and I had my hands on all the good young players in Chicago. So I sent him a list of 50 kids. Well, he says, hey, listen, I'm going to be in town in about 3 months. Let's get together. He comes into town. He calls me. We get together. I take him to my dad's restaurant. They have a meal. From there, they fly me out for 3 straight years.
Wow.
To work his camp. Right. So I get to meet all the California guys. Then Boyd Grant retires. They give him the head job. They bring me out there. And that's how I started out in California. I've been friends with Ron Adams for now 30 years, and it's been a great relationship. But that's how it started, by me writing a letter.
It's interesting. You were talking about earlier the kids, and again, coming from a teacher's family background, you hear stories all the time about how kids evolved and the accountability and all those things. And even hockey coaches, you see things and parents stop you in the lobby and say, well, how come, I had the worst thing is the watch that you're wearing and I'm wearing, and the cell phone, because parents will take their own playing time for their kid, right? And they'll show up in a lobby after a game and go, Johnny only got 6 minutes worth of ice time, or he got 5 shifts. The funniest part was, I was telling John the other day, one of those families ended up playing in our charity golf outing 2 weeks ago, and they were in the same foursome with us.
Yeah.
But back to the kids not being held accountable, is that just became tougher and tougher to recruit, because the kids had this expectation and everybody told them that they're wonderful, and school didn't matter and all those other things, and it was just basketball, and I didn't have to be accountable.
Yeah. Mark, the hardest thing now, I think, is when you talk about integrity in coaching, you have to talk about transparency. And I think what happens is a lot of coaches go away from transparency because transparency requires honesty. And honesty is what destroys relationships with people who don't want to be honest with themselves. So what happens is that when you are, and I'm a very transparent person, so if you ask me a question about your son, I will tell you exactly where your son fits in. And what happens is if you don't want to hear that, or if you're not ready to hear that, you're going to become defensive. And now all of a sudden you're going to twist it to say that that's my fault for your son not being in the position. And so instead of putting that back on your son and say, okay, coach says that these are the things that you need to do. All right. So for instance, all right, Johnny doesn't get to play, X amount of minutes. Okay, what does he need to do? Well, he needs to work on his skating, his stick handling, this, that, and the other. All right, I'm giving him an opportunity to get extra work in because these are my hours. I'm available before, after practice for extra work. I'm available on weekends for extra work. Here's how many times Johnny has shown up for these extra sessions. They happen to be 0. So please tell me how in the world Johnny's helping himself to get on the ice. Well, he's not. Okay. So why, if he's not helping himself, how can I help him?
That's a great point. And unfortunately, that translates into everyday life then, because then Johnny decides he doesn't have to show up on time for work. He doesn't even have to go to work, and he can't figure out, he shows up late every day and he can't figure out why he didn't get a promotion or didn't get a raise or whatever. And it starts, like you said, and everything I read and researched about you, the one thing that continues to stick out is at the core, you're a teacher, and you have to be a teacher before you can really be a coach. Because if you can't teach, all the rest of that stuff really doesn't matter, right? Do you think that there's a definite distinction? There are two separate elements there, as a teacher and as a coach, or can you blend those?
Entitlement is not attached to achievement, right? So so when you look at it, I think number one, you have to be a teacher. If you're going to be a coach, you have to be a teacher. See, I tell the kids all the time, I says, listen, if you're thirsty and you want to get a bucket of water, and that pond is up a hill, do you want me to stand at the top of the hill and bring you down a bucket of water and you walk away with it? And if you walk away and you're spilling that bucket all over the place, tell me the value that you think that water is to you. Or do you want me to show you how you walk up the hill, you get it yourself, and then you come down, and now you know that the value of every drop that you spill is valuable to you because you're the one who got up there, who got it yourself. Because you really are going to value every single drop because you're the one who went and got it yourself. And so if you can teach that to kids, that it's, the journey is what is the true value and it's not the result, then then those are the lessons that you stick with you for the rest of your life. The one great thing about this internet to me is the connection that you get to keep with the players that you've coached all these years, right? I've coached so many decades, and now my kids that I've had in California and I had at Stag and I've had all over the place, this Facebook thing here, I get to stay in touch. Now they've got kids, and now, they write to me, say, Coach, I didn't understand it at the time, but now that I'm raising my own kids, now I understand what you were trying to teach me. I understand what you were trying to tell me. I thought you were a really asshole when we were going through this, but you know what? Now I'm the asshole, and now I understand that, right?
But
And
those
so,
are life lessons. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
and to me, those are the greatest things that you can teach kids. I've been fortunate to win a whole bunch of championships and games and all that other stuff, but it really doesn't mean anything. At the end, what difference does it make, right? But if you can influence a life, if you can help a kid live a better life, if you can help a kid help their kids live better lives, that's what it's all about. And I think that's the impact that you hope that you can make, and that to me that's what coaching's all about.
Al, no matter if it was California or here in Illinois, playing, coaching on the college level and in the high school level. I mean, here we've been with Bradley, UIC. You've been head coaches at, all these York. Does the parent always, you think, be the problem when you are putting this team together? Or what's Biancalana doing? Why is he running that play? Because for me and Mark, I thought it was always the parent that was the complainer. Did you find that at every level, this could be the problem?
It took me a while to separate the kid from the parent. All right, because I used to connect it. Like if I was having a problem with the parent, then I was going to have I would look at the kid being a problem. Then with more maturity, coaching maturity, you separate the two. It's not, the kid can't pick his parents, right? And so a lot of times the kid is actually embarrassed by what the parent is doing. So there's a lot of times I've had private conversations with kids, and kids will tell me, Coach, please don't listen to my parents. Okay. I'm with you. I got you. I know what you're doing. Please stay with me. Okay. I want to do this with you. And so then I can tune out the parent, concentrate on the kid, because that's all that matters. And then there's parents that are just wonderful parents. There's parents that I'm still friendly with today, of kids that, have really got it and have been extremely helpful. And that's been the majority of the experiences that I have. Unfortunately, there have been, you get those parents that kind of stick in your craw, and you remember those a lot more. And you just got to kind of, put those aside and forget. My wife is wonderful at reminding me, hey, listen, stop focusing on all that negativity and think about the positive and all the wonderful relationships that you have developed with great families over the years, and that's what you got to kind of remember. It's difficult. It's, with some parents, it's just really, really, really difficult. And it hurts. I mean, you're a human being, it hurts to be told, you're that you're no good or anything. The greatest thing about COVID that ever happened was that when parents couldn't come to games, because when parents couldn't come to games, then I was never told how bad I was. So that was great. I didn't have to listen to them. So,
No,
That
but,
was-
to bolt on to that, and unfortunately, and we could go off on a whole nother subject because of the generation we're raised in, is being, as grumpy old men or whatever. But the cost of everything involved now, and now the parent becomes even more demanding, saying, hey, I sent my kid to 7 camps. I spent $400 on Jordan shoes or $300 on a bat and all this other stuff. And now you're going to
Absolutely.
tell me I can't have input on my kid's career? Holy moly.
Or with the AAU coach, they spend 1,700 on an AAU coach, and the AAU coach tells them how great the kid is because he wants the 1,700 the following year. And then you're telling, I could watch the kid for 5 minutes and make an evaluation, with the experience that I have now, that they shouldn't pay a dime because he's not going to be a Division I player. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a freshman at Holy Cross, I had the most demanding coach I ever played for in my life with Don Halverson. Don, I don't know if you remember Don Halverson.
I
And
sure do.
Don Halverson was a Marine, ex-Marine, and he was just a tough son of a gun. And he ran us into a wall. I mean, I wound up loving the guy. I just wound up loving the guy. Played for him in baseball and in football. But anyways, one day in the middle of the season, I had enough. He was all over me and he was yelling and screaming at me, and I had enough. And every Tuesday night was my dad's day off, and that was the one night that he would come home and have dinner with us. So after practice, I come home and I sit down, and my dad says, well, how was football today? And I says, oh, it was just terrible. Coach Alverson was just yelling and screaming. And he says, and I said, I'm going to quit, and I just can't take it anymore. He's just too tough on me. And he says, I'm just not, I don't like it anymore. I'm going to quit. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. My dad turned to me and he says, boy, that is such great news. And I said, why is that, Dad? He says, because our afternoon dishwasher quit today. And he says, I can pick you up at 3:00. Right when you get done with school, I can drive you over, and you can wash dishes till the 6:00 shifts happens. You can get done with all the lunch dishes, and then I'll drive you back home. You can have dinner and then do your homework, and then I'll pick you up every day after school at 3:00. No, wait a second, Dad. I didn't say I was going to quit that.
Good old Dad used the reverse.
Wait a second. And I didn't say I was certain that I was going to quit. He goes, oh, okay. I never mentioned one more time about quitting anything to my father ever again.
Wow.
And it just, and I'm thinking to myself, now a kid comes home and says, I'm thinking of quitting. He's picking up the phone to the AD. He's in the AD's office. You got a 4-hour meeting with the AD. Then it goes to the principal. Then it goes to the district office. It's crazy. It's crazy. But
yeah, it goes back to what John said. It's parents, and it screws up the whole concept, because we've had experiences on the hockey side where kids have played with a different travel team every year, and it was always the coach's fault.
Yeah.
And so the whole experience of playing hockey for 12 years, the kid never ended up having any real friendships, because he was a 16-year-old mercenary. He was just out there to get power play time and get points and try to get to the next level, and friendships and learning how to be a team player be damned. And that's just an unfortunate thing. And that's a shame on the parents. And unfortunately, you see a lot more of that than you'd really like to.
Well, I'll go back to the
Mark and Al, I want to just bring something up. Al, you did leave a lasting impression. How I reconnected with you, you don't even know it. I was reading an article a few years back in 1995, in a town of Downers Grove wanted Al Biancalana. Do you remember that story?
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll tell you, that town wrapped around you. I mean, that school, everything. And I know it was a philosophy issue, but if you don't mind touching base on that one, because that shows me the lasting impression of Al Biancalana.
Well, again, when you put yourself out there, and you kind of plant your flag, and you have some strong beliefs, there's going to be people that are fighting you. And unfortunately, we had an administration that kind of fought back a little bit. And so, there was a little bit of a power play within our administration, and they wanted to go one way. And unfortunately, it wasn't the way that I wanted to go. And so they wanted to cut ties and go in a different direction. And then once that got out, the community just went kind of nuts, and kids went nuts, and
They rallied for you.
yeah, they staged a walkout, and there was storming of the board meeting and everything else. It was a nice outpouring and that meant a lot to me. And a lot of those people are still, I'm still very close with today, and that was a shame because we had things rolling there. And but it goes to show that, you gotta stand up for what you believe in. And when you stand up for what you believe in, there's going to be times where you're going to get knocked down. Sports and being in athletics is a highly emotional thing. And some people are going to try to take away maybe some popularity. Maybe there's some jealousies. Maybe there's some people that don't like, what you're doing and how you're doing it. And it's, and especially in high school, I always tell people, especially young people, I says, your jobs are all about the people that you work for. If you don't have an administration that will back you, then it's a very tough job, because there's always going to be someone that is going to go against you and going to, cause some problems for you. And if you've got a solid administration behind you, then it really makes your life a lot easier.
I got one question, and you've been great with your time, and because there's still so many floating around recruiting and that, but
Yeah.
what, and UIC is my alma mater and all, but what is it about Chicago that develops so many good high school players, and you struggle to get them to stay home? And will that change with people being able to own their own image and the market in Chicago and potential TV and some of that? Do you think that might have an impact?
Mark, that's a good question. I think there's a couple things. Number one, I think if you look at the inner city, and this is where I think we ran ourselves into trouble. If you're a top player, and you look at DePaul, for instance, if you're a top player in Chicago, and the inner workings of Chicago and how difficult it is to stay in Chicago because of the violence and because of all the other things that are surrounding you and that you've been through since birth, I think the last thing you want to do is stay here. Okay. So I think that when you have your options of going to Duke or Kansas or places like that, I think you're going to go. I don't think you're going to stay home. Now, one thing that Illinois has done a good job of is, hey, look, come down here, and you're away, but yet this is still representing your state. So I think they've done a good job of doing that. And I think that that's the hook. Hey, listen, this is our state school, and you can still represent Illinois, be here, and you don't have to be, in the inner city all the time. When we were at UIC, it was very difficult to do that. Then you start saying, okay, when we were at Bradley, we said, okay, a 6-hour radius around Bradley is really all we need. Well, a 6-hour radius around Bradley took you to 6 different states. I mean, we could touch a lot of people there. And to get to Bradley with all of that different, Kentucky and Missouri and Minnesota and Iowa, in Indiana. I mean, it was an endless list of possibilities. But when you take that 6 hours, it really looks attractive in Chicago. But to get a Milwaukee kid or to get a suburban Wisconsin kid to go to Chicago, it's a little rougher, so to recruit in that inner city, it's a little different type of kid. That's why I always thought that UIC would be better off recruiting more junior college kids. I always thought, and when I was there, that was one thing that I really tried to push. I think we should have been half and half junior college and high school kids, because of that, just because junior college kids will go anywhere because they know it's their last chance, so it's completely different,
I appreciate that. That was a very thoughtful answer. I didn't even think about, and it ties into some other stuff. We talked to Ray Mancini a couple days ago, and he had talked about how boxing was a poor man's sport and made comment about the inner city as well. And so again, I appreciate your honesty and clarity on that because that really puts a different spotlight on it. So thank you. So, Mr. Canena, Mr.
Yes.
Venus Travel, you got to wrap up for this gentleman.
I sure do. I sure do. And Mark, I want you to know this one might take a little bit longer than I thought, maybe a couple of minutes, but I want you to know Al Biancalana and I really never met in high school, but I got to tell you something about Al Biancalana. I knew of him. I was a junior when he was a senior. I remember him playing football at Holy Cross. And what I remember about Al, I remember the number 75. Was a great year when he played there in 78, his last season. He was a leader. He was a great baseball player. He mentioned a coach named Don Halverson, who was a guy that you just didn't mess around with. And I remember going out to watch games late in that season. That was another great team because he was on a team with Mike Rizzo, who now is the general manager or the president of the Washington Nationals. And again, Al Biancalana was a leader. He went to Elmhurst, a leader. Al, you have left a lasting impression that I'll never forget. And I have to tell you, I don't want you to think, wow, John's bringing this up. But when I was a junior, you were a guy that I knew was going to do something. And this resume for the basketball and just this conversation tonight, Al, has truly, like, I was wowed by it because I was talking to Glenn Cardelli, a former player that you played with. And I says, Glenn, we're going to view Al in a couple of weeks. And he goes, John, you will be amazed at the knowledge and everything that Al's done in your career. And Al, congratulations on the Hall of Fame. I mean, again, just this was something that I was looking forward to tonight. And I really thank you for coming on Angles and Attitudes with me and Mark.
Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate it. I'm touched by your words, and it's anytime I can give back, it's been an honor for me to be able to help others along the way, like people have helped me. And so I've been truly blessed. Thank you very much, guys.
Well, I thank you, Al, and stay well. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the line.
Hey, anytime you guys need it.
Thank you.
For sure, Al, for sure.
All right.